Well, Mr. Secretary, welcome. And first of all, I want to thank you for your service. As a former secretary, I understand how difficult your task is, and I appreciate your service. I also understand the responsibility you bear, being responsible for our transportation system and a secure supply chain. I'm sure we both agree that I would say it is in our best interest in national security to have a supply chain that is controlled by U.S. or our allies. I also would ask you to agree that energy independence certainly would be a priority in our national security.
Indeed.
Given that, you also have a record of being an advocate for climate change. I don't think that's changed. Would you, is that
I wouldn't
a fair
say I'm for
assessment?
climate change. I'm for fighting it, certainly, yes.
So are you aware then that China is the largest emitter of CO2?
Yes.
And are you aware that China is responsible for 90% of the plastics? 90% of the plastics in the oceans come from 4 rivers in China. Are you aware of that?
I didn't know that statistic, but I'm not surprised by it.
Well, are you aware also that China is the largest violator of fishing regulations and laws?
Yes.
And of course, you're also aware of critical minerals.
Yes.
Are you aware that China controls, either directly or indirectly, more than 62%, in many cases the preponderance or absolute control of critical minerals?
A condition we are working hard to change in this administration.
And I'm going to ask you further about that. But critical minerals, as you know, is also required for EV.
Indeed.
Seems to be that cobalt, lithium, in some cases germanium, is absolutely required for EV. And are you aware that to meet the demands today, that the U.S. would have to increase mining by 2,000% for 20 years to reach the demands today?
Well, the chemistry of our batteries has not completely stabilized in a way that I think can be fully predicted for the next
There may
decade,
be
but
innovation.
there's no question that we're
but
going to
right now.
there's no question that we're going
No,
to need to
no
source
question.
more minerals, both domestically and from friendly countries.
Well, and that's the catch, is that we all want cleaner, better, more efficient. But your stated goal and President Biden's stated goal, and my stated goal, and certainly President Trump's was the same, is that we seek energy independence. We seek energy dominance so we're not held hostage by foreign entities.
Indeed.
So how do you get to be energy independent when the components of EV today are all controlled by China? And have you done an assessment of how much mining we would have to do and where the critical minerals are and what we'd have to do in order to meet the demands of a very aggressive program to convert? And have you done an assessment?
Yes, thanks for the question. While some of the finer points related to extraction are probably better answered by my colleagues at the Department of the Interior, our Joint Office of Energy and Transportation, which is jointly run by both us and the
And
Department
what does
of
the
Energy,
assessment say since you've completed it?
Well, what that work is doing is identifying different points, not just in the raw material extraction itself, but also in the refining, where we see that if we were to—
But have you identified where our sticking points is?
Right, so a lot of the—
how to get there in 10 years? Because it seems like on the supply chain, if China controls it today, and we're putting moratorium on mines in Minnesota that have the largest nickel deposit in critical minerals, and we're not moving forward on securing the supply chain, but we're moving forward on solar cells.
Well, again, the Department of
Solar
Energy—
cells made in China. So
It'd be much easier to answer
So how are you
your
going to
question
figure
if
this
not.
out?
Okay. So part of what you're describing is the motivation behind the investments that the Department of Energy has been leading in enhancing U.S.
Well,
domestic—
I agree. There's effort, but have you identified source? Because there's a difference between practical, real, and fiction.
Well,
So
I know
how are
that
you going to be independent if China produces the very components that make up EV?
this is exactly why we're doing the work to produce them here in the United States. I wish you
What are we doing on cobalt? How much cobalt are we producing in this country? The next 10 years, what do we need? And how are we going to— I'm a military guy. I love plans.
Great.
You know I do.
Well, first of all, I'd encourage you to become familiar with the private investment and the public-private partnership investment, real dollars, not just plans, that are going out through these DOE
Have you read the
programs.
Critical Mineral Report, the Multi-Agency Report 2017?
I have not read the 2017 Multi-Agency Critical Mineral Report.
I am very familiar,
I'm sure you are.
absolutely familiar. Have you read the 2017 climate change report, multi-agency?
I believe that's informed some of the work that is in
you
our
read it?
plans through the Joint Energy, but I've not read that document cover to cover, no.
I would suggest that, Mr. Secretary, that you read those two documents.
Well, I
Because
can,
on both cases,
Mhm.
what they clearly state is the U.S. is becoming dependent on China.
which is,
And unless we change the rudder, is that we will be more dependent. And unless we figure out the supply chain first, our pursuit of EV makes us more dependent on China.
I would
For
argue
solar-
that our action to win the EV future cannot wait. I would argue that China is already working to win EVs and that they will win if
Well,
we
Mr.
do not
Secretary,
pursue this.
if it requires critical minerals and we don't have control of them, and China manufactures, produces, processes the very components necessary for EV, then how is that achievable to be independent if we depend on China more? And the more we press, and I'm all for the above, all the above. But before we leap blindly, there's two concerns. One is that we have clear control, either ourselves or our allies, of the supply chain to include the critical minerals and components. Secondly is what are we going to do when they're end of life cycle? As you know, 90%, or are you aware that 90% of the solar cells today are dumped in some landfill across the country?
I'm not as familiar with the life cycle of solar cells, but I would emphasize one of the most important things to bear in mind when we think about the critical mineral sourcing and refining that goes into EV battery components is that end-of-life recycling will be a vital part of how we meet our marks. Now, of course, that's alongside the onshoring and friendshoring that we need to do, both with regard to the extraction.
Unfortunately, we're going to take a
and refinement.
recess, but the concerns, I'll end it with this, is the concerns I have are supply chain from the very beginning to the very end. What are we going to do, and does that make us more vulnerable to a potential adversary? So with that, since there's only one member and promotion by attrition, we'll have to take a quick recess, and sir, thank you for being here tonight. I appreciate all you do.
Thank you, Congressman.
Hey, before you click on the next video, if y'all could do me a big favor and hit that like button. The algorithm loves it, and so do I, because it helps promote these videos and get the message out about what our government has been doing. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications, because every time I put out a video, you want to know about it, right? Thanks again, and have a good one. See you on the next one. Peace.